we're able to bring this training to you thanks to some funding that we received from a family foundation here in the Bay Area, and that's the Zellerbach Family Foundation. So we're very appreciative of the funds that we were able to receive, and feel like we've used them in a real worthwhile way here in creating this program. And again, I'd like to also point out that my colleague, Betsy Sheldon, who's now here in the back, if you don't mind waving your hand, Betsy. Betsy's a mental health specialist in our office, and she did the work to secure that funding, so we acknowledge your efforts, and thank you, Betsy. So hopefully those of you that attended the first session enjoyed it as much as I did the first time I got to see this. Again, the purposes of this presentation is to create awareness about the mental health needs of some of our student veteran population. And with this training, we hope to increase awareness about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injuries, and depression that some of our veterans face, and hopefully the working's back.
Yeah.
And give you the ability to hopefully pick up on some of the signs and symptoms of those conditions. Again, our presenter is Dr. David Joseph. He currently provides treatment for veterans with readjustment, stress, and combat or military sexual trauma at the Oakland Vet Center. As a psychologist at the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorders, Dr. Joseph served as the primary clinician on a multi-year study of seeking safety in veterans with co-occurring PTSD and substance use disorders. In addition to these trainings, Dr. Joseph has developed trainings for police officers, first responders, and providers on effective interventions for veterans with PTSD. He completed his clinical internship at Napa State Hospital and received his PhD in clinical psychology from Alliance University in San Francisco. And
we're ready to go.
Computer programmer.
That's
well,
right.
so,
Let's just make sure it's working. Okay.
Great. Please, again, welcome, Dr. David.
Thank you. Let me just make sure the sound is actually on. Okay. Let us pick up where we left off. Here we go. So, where did we leave off? We left off having just talked about really the diagnosis of and trying to understand the different manifestations of and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. That was really how we spent, for those of you who are just coming in now, that's how we spent a good part of our time over the last hour and 15 minutes, was talking about readjustment stressors that many veterans have when they come back, and in particular really starting to understand what PTSD is, what it looks like, how it's affected, and so on and so forth. And so where we're going to pick up with is coping with PTSD and the consequence of trauma. One of the things that we find when we talk about PTSD is that alcohol can be a very culturally acceptable way to blow off steam and be sociable. If you served in the military, you may have been around people that used alcohol in this way. Actually, if you are 19, you may have been around people who used alcohol in this way. But particularly in the military, it's not uncommon for someone to say, yeah, we got back from deployment and we were just drunk for 4 days. Because that's par for the course, not necessarily a bad thing. What also happens, though, is that alcohol, along with substance use, can be a really, and I'm going to qualify this in a second, good way to manage the overwhelming experience and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. So what do I mean by a really good way? Well, what I mean is that alcohol and other substances help a lot. They help you numb out. They help you avoid triggers. They help you get some sleep. If you drink enough alcohol, I'm told, you will sleep. And what will you not do? Dream. You will not dream, or at least not be aware of your dreams or be aware of your nightmares. What you also won't do is rest. We know that sleep induced by alcohol is not particularly restful, but it is sleep. And if you are sleeping 2 to 3 hours a night, alcohol can sometimes do the trick, as can pot and some other things. It helps you get sleep. It helps you feel sociable and comfortable. It is also a way of giving up, of saying, screw it. I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to drink. There's that element too, of just giving up on whatever the struggle is. Punishing yourself is sometimes an element that we don't hear an awful lot about, particularly sometimes when I talk to veterans who've experienced sexual trauma or some kind of interpersonal trauma. I'll see alcohol used in a way not only to numb out, but to punish. That if they feel like they've done something wrong, they feel like they're responsible for something, alcohol is often used as a way to manage guilt. So, the odds of having a substance use disorder are 3 times greater in folks that have post-traumatic stress disorder. What does that tell us? It tells us, number one, that the symptoms of PTSD are extremely profound. They're very hard to deal with on your own, and that at least in the short term, certainly not in the long term, it tells us that substance use, alcohol predominantly but not only, actually does work. And so oftentimes when we're talking to veterans with PTSD, we're also talking to veterans who are in some way either struggling with or using alcohol or other substances to cope with those experiences and those symptoms. It's something to be aware of, because oftentimes when you don't know that, what you will see or what other people will see, and I have this conversation with law enforcement a lot, you will see a substance use or alcohol problem, not a PTSD problem. When ultimately what's really happening is that someone went to war, somebody experienced trauma, and the result of that is a substance use problem that's very functionally being used to manage symptoms. It's helpful to have that conversation if you can, to even point it out or to know about it, because when you're able to see that those two are interrelated, you can make different suggestions. So what typically happens for veterans is they will have trouble with alcohol, and again, this is not everyone, but for those who do, and they'll be told, what you got to do is you got to get your shit together and stop drinking. And the veteran will think of it that way too. I believe, yeah, I do have to do that. I have to stop drinking. But what happens when they stop drinking? It all comes back. So there's a setup for failure there. But the conversation in their families, in their community, and often at workplace and even at school can largely be about the alcohol or the substance use and not about what's driving it. So you may have, for example, a veteran who says, well, I'm going to go to an AA group. Maybe campus has an AA group that meets or an NA group that meets, but they go there and they don't see anyone there that they can relate to. Which isn't to say that AA and NA aren't helpful. Oftentimes they are, or they can be, but their response is, these people aren't drinking for the same reasons that I'm drinking, or I can't relate to them, and that doesn't work out. And what really, really needs to happen is a referral to mental health. Okay, so something to know. PTSD in relationships. Coping with PTSD. Here. This is, let's see if we can actually hear it. This is a little clip from a video entitled The War Tapes. And what we're going to see are a number of couples, hopefully we can hear them, a number of couples talking about their relationship, and just get a sense. Both of the men are veterans, in this case it's 2 men, and both of them are talking about kind of what it's like to come home.
He's not the same person anymore. He's not. He had really worked on his temper before he went to Iraq. He was great. He was so much calmer than me. And just being in Iraq, his temper is just, it's back. We actually have flashbacks. We were driving and I saw a spider on the window and went, and he just completely freaked out. He had a flashback. He thought he was going to hit somebody, and then he just had a flashback of them hitting the woman and just got very upset. And he's like, don't ever do that again. And we wound up getting into an argument about it. What him and I struggle with is he so badly wants me to understand what he went through. I will never understand, just as he will never understand what I went through. Sometimes I feel like he doesn't live in reality. He so badly wants to be okay that he's just going to believe that and everything will be fine. I took a vow with him for better, for worse, sickness and in health, till death do us part. I don't want to get out of that. There are days that I don't like him. Absolutely. There are days I don't like him. But I still love him.
Give me the hugs.
I just can't imagine my life without him. I just can't.
I don't want to tell people what it was like over there. That's a fucking mess, you know? I went over there and did the job I was supposed to do. People tend to ask some ignorant questions, you know? Did you kill anybody? What's it like over there? Or when do you have to go back? That woman was like,
Yeah.
hey, oh, it's good to have you home.
You like that?
That was like just right.
I know. And
That's
she's
all you
old.
need to say. You
Yeah,
know?
that's it.
Not like,
Well, people don't know what to say, I think.
that's exactly what you say.
Because sometimes I don't know what to say.
Yeah, but, you know, we got
Even
plenty
with
of
a-
other things to talk about.
Yeah. Can't sleep nights. He won't say it's nightmares, but I know they are.
I'm locked into the VA. I went there, and I don't know. They say I got asthma, and hearing loss, and post-traumatic stress disorder. This is all right. I mean, I don't know. Good, really good. Oh, hey, stop.
He doesn't like to talk about it.
It's not broken.
I feel like he thinks if he doesn't talk about it, then he'll forget about it. It's still there, and it still hurts, and I still feel it. And I want to cry a lot.
Dog tags?
Where? Yeah, I don't know why.
Can I see?
Yeah, they're still on.
Do you know why?
I don't know. I just haven't taken them off, that's all.
Any thoughts about that? Reactions? Anyone notice a little bit of stress in these couples? A little bit of tension? Yeah, a lot of tension. Yet, do these seem like, in the grand scale of things, do these seem like good couples? Generally people who like and care about each other. Yeah, generally they do. They seem like people who really do. And yet you see a lot of tension that's being formed. Things that can't be talked about, things that aren't talked about, things that can't be explained, triggers that happen out of the blue. So I don't know if you caught what happened in the first couple. They're talking about their driving. She responds to a spider, and that leads them down a chain. That surprise noise triggers him. He has a flashback. He responds by being angry because she did that to him. They get into an argument about that. That can last for a day, right? And you can see how very, very small things sometimes, like in this case, a spider, can have a profound effect on the way a day goes, a relationship goes, and so on and so forth. And so for a lot of our veterans, student veterans or not, these are the kinds of stressors that we're talking about that happen in relationships. Now, these are two fairly good couples. They seem more put together than maybe some other folks, and yet you can get a sense of how much they deal with on a day-to-day basis. That this isn't something that flares up every now and again, or something that comes to their attention every couple of months. This is a day-to-day interaction between a veteran who's processing his experiences in war, trying to find some measure of peace with it, trying to deal with post-traumatic stress symptoms, and the spouse or the girlfriend who's trying to figure it out, trying not to get yelled at, trying to say the right thing. I thought the second woman said something really well. She said, you know, sometimes I don't know what to say, right? And he kind of blows it off. But I think that's a really profound point, that she wants to know what to say. It's not clear what the right thing to say is, and in any case, she doesn't know, and he doesn't know, really, what it is that she should say. And so when we think about our veterans coming to school, and of course, I mentioned this yesterday too, if you heard me, they're not the only ones that have stress at home. And again, not every veteran has stress at home, but if you have PTSD, this is the kind of stress you might have at home. But for our veterans, this particular type of stress is something that is really prevalent. and often leads to more severe consequences in relationships when you start adding financial difficulties, you start adding physical health difficulties, and you start adding children, and so on and so forth. The tension gets higher, and it becomes harder to really be successful in those relationships. And all of that is happening for some veterans as they are trying to get their education and come back to school. So sometimes there's an awful lot that's on their plate. Lack of social support, as we talked about a little bit earlier, has been found to be the strongest predictor of PTSD. But the difficulty with PTSD is that part of the symptomology of PTSD is kind of isolating yourself from and in some ways destroying the social support system that you have or had available to you. So in many cases, veterans either don't have that support system, or for whatever reason, as a result of their PTSD and the difficulties they have with intimacy and frustration, anger, symptoms, and so forth, they alienate themselves and isolate themselves from the support that would otherwise be available. And again, that's a pitch for community colleges to really work to create those environments, those non-judgmental, comfortable environments like veteran resource centers that are places that veterans can go and feel like they are around other people who do know what to say, or at least know what not to say, or have been there. Yes, ma'am.
If we have veterans center on campus, how do we avoid duplication of clinical services? I mean, I'm assuming they're getting help from the VA.
Well, they might be. In many cases, they're not. But yes, how can you avoid duplicating services? I would say that you're not duplicating services in any way. That what a student gets out of the Veteran Resource Center is radically different than what they would get out of, let's say, coming and talking to me, but not less important.
Well, because we're thinking about having someone on campus who can provide counseling.
No, then what I would say, you're not duplicating services, you're supplementing services, because you're making it so we send a couple of our counselors to different community colleges and we're trying to work it out where we do more. And what you're actually doing is you're facilitating a process where a veteran can get good counseling without having to miss class. Right? Where they don't actually have to get in their car and deal with all these other triggers and schedule their life around this 1 hour long appointment that they're going to have, where they have to find parking and have to get ready. And if it's the VA, they got to go up to the counter and they got to wait. You're actually eliminating all of that. They can go from their English class to counseling, and then from counseling back to their math class. That to me is a tremendous service to be able to offer, because one of the biggest barriers to treatment at the VA and other places is that you're asking folks who we're trying to encourage to work and go back to school to not do those things so they can come and see us. So to the degree that you can remove those kinds of obstacles, I think you're providing an excellent service. PTSD and suicide has to be talked about. Did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. When we're not as lucky to maybe be able to bring in counseling staff or something like that, what recommendations do you have for the VRC?
If you're not able to bring someone, a counselor, a knowledgeable counselor or therapist to your college, and many colleges aren't, my recommendation, and I'll get to it at the end, but I'll say it now, is to know some that you know personally. Make a personal connection so that you can have a warm handoff. Right? So that if you want to make a referral, you're not saying, hey, why don't you go to the VA? What you're saying is, I'd like you to talk to Frank. He's really good. I know him. He may have served, or he's been doing this a long time. He's really, here's his number. That kind of handoff is really, really different from, hey, the VA is only a couple of miles away from here. Why don't you go down there? Really different. I think most, certainly vet centers, but also VAs will be amenable to that. If they can't come, they'd at least be amenable to trying to get to know you and vice versa. Yeah. And
as a student, as a vet, and now as somebody working on behalf of vet, what about the idea, well, I'm very strong in the idea of veterans talking to veterans, identifying, if you are lucky enough to have some veterans that are participating in things on your campus, identify ones that know or that are aware of these things, and just having one vet talking to another vet is helpful.
Yeah. So the question is, what about vets talking to vets? I'm a huge fan of vets talking to vets. And again, I don't think that in any way contradicts more formal counseling or therapy. I think that it adds an incredibly important social support, incredibly important layer when you can have vets who've been at a campus a little bit longer, mentor other veterans who haven't been, who are just coming to the campus, not necessarily on mental health issues. Even if it's don't take Dr. Smith, he's terrible and he smells bad. Or don't take this English class, you're gonna have to write a self-reflective essay. Like those are the kind of, or do this, or have you signed up for this benefit yet? No, I haven't done that. Where do I do that? I'll go with you. Right? Most VA counselors, vet center counselors, we can't do that. So having that kind of mentorship and connection is essential. And a lot of that happens, I think, informally at Veterans Resource Centers, where people are just sitting around and they're, whatever it is, if you have a pool table or if you've got video games or you've got computers, and they're just bouncing the stuff off of each other, but they feel comfortable doing it because everyone's a veteran. So yeah, huge fan of that. Yeah, last question.
I would suggest that on our campus, what we did, we have a health center, and our health center actually hired a therapist. So we have a therapist on our campus, but it's around the corner from the vet center, and it's a recommendation. I would send out emails to them. There's no contact, we don't know when they go, but we send out the information, the hours and the times, and that therapist is there and has time set aside just for vets only on certain days. And then we have on Tuesday morning or afternoons, we call a vet jam session. It's like if someone comes in and has questions about something that can't be answered, then we have vets that come in at 11 and they bring questions and they all discuss it amongst themselves.
So to summarize, and then I think it's interesting that we stopped on the suicide slide, but to summarize, I think what I'm getting out of what you're saying and what some other folks are saying, informal support from veterans to other veterans, whether it's, even if it's organized in the sense of like you do it at a particular time, but informal in the sense that it's not counseling or therapy per se, is incredibly, incredibly valuable. And I'll tell you that the campuses that I've been to that don't have that at all are campuses where veterans struggle more because they feel isolated, they are isolated, they don't know who to talk to, they can't bounce ideas off each other. And one veteran can say to another veteran, dude, you are off base. Like, hey, this is what I did, is that cool? No, it's not cool. But another veteran can't say that, right? So there's a lot of kind of policing that can happen or educating or kind of help in terms of managing some of the readjustment stress that people have or the acculturation stress that can happen from one veteran to another that's much, much harder to do when someone isn't a veteran. So if you're getting where I'm going with this, veteran resource centers are a good thing, and providing them and providing space for them for informal activities like that is really, really positive. Now, back to suicide. We've officially distracted ourselves. Veterans with PTSD have a 6 to 10 times greater chance of committing suicide than the United States general population. That's high. To be even more graphic about it, the numbers in red, look at the Marine and Army as they go up, by the way, just to give you a sense. I know you can see this. This is the general population. Looks fairly stable, just above 10%. That's per 100,000, by the way. Look at what happens as deployments start to happen, or this is in some ways following deployments, straight up. Okay? Look at the Army, straight up. Interestingly, and I actually don't have an explanation for this, except maybe they're doing a better job tracking it, we've noticed an increase in the Air Force suicide rate. But there is a huge correlation between tours, combat tours, and tours of duty in war zones and subsequent suicide rates. So again, as we're talking about PTSD and we're talking about suicide, the consequences of going to war and the consequences of going to war sometimes many, many, many times can be severe. And one form that can take is suicide. To continue to kind of belabor this point, the VA reports 18 suicides a day amongst the entire veteran population. 1,000 suicide attempts per month. Where are you going to notice some of the warning signs? On your campus. Now, here's a difficult thing for me. It's a difficult conversation to have because I want you to both be aware of this and also not overreact to it at the same time. What we don't want is mass hysteria, where every time a veteran talks about being down, we overreact and have 3 different people call them and find out if they're suicidal. That's very alienating. But we also want to be really aware of the fact that veterans with PTSD are much more likely than the general population to kill themselves. And I think one way, in particular, it's important to remember female veterans 2 to 3 times more likely to commit suicide than non-veteran women. So as difficult as it is for men, it is more difficult for women. These are sobering numbers. We need to pay attention to them. We need to talk to our student veterans. We need to give them opportunities to talk and express how they're doing. Again, what is one of the greatest buffers against suicide? Social support. I'm going to keep hammering that home. Social support. That is also a reason, and I'll say this later on again, why you want to have good connections with your counseling staff and why you want to have they want to have good connections with clinicians who are really, really experienced in working with veterans. And that could include some folks in the private practice community. So we have, in the Bay Area, we have the Coming Home Project, and they provide free mental health care to veterans. They're all well-trained therapists. They're out in the community. They're in some ways more easily accessible than VA clinicians, and it's good to know someone like that too, because they've also gotten training. Let's move into military sexual trauma. That's something that we need to be really, really aware of. Did you experience unwanted sexual attention, uninvited sexual advances, or forced sex while in the military? Does this experience continue to affect your life today? That's how we determine military sexual trauma. Those are the questions that we ask. 20% of respondents who say yes are women. 1% are men. That is a very large number of people. Around 60,000 men and around 60,000 women. I would argue, without official data, that the number of women should probably be higher, because my guess is that some of the women who serve in the military get so used to the kinds of things that happen that they stop thinking of it as abusive. That's a guess that I would say. I would also suggest that 1% of men is probably a little low because it gets underreported. But even these numbers, even if they're lower than reality, are high enough that we should be concerned about it and high enough that we should pay attention to it. And why in particular sexual trauma? Again, in the military, it's not the only place that it happens. Veterans who've been raped or sexually assaulted are not the only people in your classroom that have had those experiences, unfortunately. But there's something that I want you to know about that experience in the military and why it is unique. And here are some of the reasons. Number one, in the military, there is a strict code of chain of command. So what do you do in a situation where you have been sexually assaulted by someone who is above you in the chain of command? In order to report, now there are some units in some places where they've tried to solve this situation, but historically they haven't. In order to report sexual assault, you actually have to break chain of command. If you are in a war zone, where are you going to go? Let's say they find that your report is believable and legitimate. What are they going to do? Send you home? Now you're in the middle of a war zone. You're there to support your brothers and sisters that you're fighting with and that you're working with, and suddenly they're going to pick you up and send you home because of something that happened to you. A lot of folks don't want to do that. They feel like they owe it to their units and their friends to stay in, so they won't report it. There's a tremendous pressure not to report, because if you report sexual assault, you are admitting to weakness and lack of self-reliance. You've received, particularly for men, you've received a lot of training. Why did you allow that to happen? No one may say that to you, but most of our veterans feel that way. There can be a tremendously negative effect on your career and advancement if you report military sexual trauma. Incidentally, let's say, for example, we're in a unit and I report the experience of military sexual trauma from someone in the unit. How likely is it that everyone in the unit will know that I've done that? Very, very likely. If they take that person who I've now reported and do something with them, they either remove them or they punish that person or they send them away, and that person was popular. Maybe that person was an outstanding soldier or Marine. What will be the response of the group to me? Very, very negative in many cases. And so the decision to report military sexual trauma is a very complicated one. It has a lot to do with the way that the military is structured. There's often no real good solution. And so what we often find is that veterans or military service members who experience sexual trauma in the military do not report it at the time and then sit with it for a really long time. And then what typically happens is they don't report it for all these reasons. Report may not be believed also, and so forth, and then start to act out, right? Because they're having symptoms, they're angry, this event happened, they haven't told anyone, so they start to act out. And then what happens? They get punished, and they start noticing that they are not getting advancements. They start noticing that they're getting Article 15s or whoever what on their disciplinary actions in their career, and they haven't told anyone yet what happened. And so it's not unlikely or not unusual to hear someone who is even given an other than honorable discharge from the military as a result of a military sexual trauma that was not reported. Now they are being not only not being helped, but actually being actively punished for this thing that happened. And so for a lot of our veterans, the experience of military sexual trauma was actually compounded by the experience of reporting. That reporting, in fact, was as traumatic and in some cases more traumatic than the actual assault itself. Very cheery news. The military is generally getting better at this, but to say that they're good at it yet is not accurate. It continues to be a really big problem. Okay, so where does that leave you all? Well, it leaves you hopefully with an awareness that when we're talking to veterans, both male and female, who are suffering with something like post-traumatic stress disorder, we're not just talking about combat. We're not just talking about combat. And so one of the worst things that you can say to a veteran, particularly a female veteran, when they tell you, you say, well, what did you do in the military? And they say, well, I went to Iraq. Well, what did you do in Iraq? I worked in admin. And you say, oh, good. Phew. Well, I guess nothing happened to you then. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that said to our female veterans, who incidentally were also subject to mortar fire and convoys and IEDs and all those other things, and may have been subjected to military sexual trauma. So be careful, be aware that sometimes in our male and female veterans, they will have symptoms that are not combat related. And if you know that they weren't in combat, you might say to yourself, well, they weren't in combat, so I don't know what's going on here, right? If you're aware that this can also be a part of their experience, you can be sensitive to it and do make the same kind of referrals and offer the same kind of assistance as you would to anyone else. It's also good to, because of that, be particularly aware of triggers. How close you stand to somebody, whether they're comfortable with group work or not comfortable with group work, if they're not comfortable staying at school after hours, and so on and so forth. They may not be able to tell you why. In fact, I doubt they would tell you why. But if you start to notice something like that, that gives you an opportunity to help make adjustments for them. And again, not just for student veterans, but also for student veterans. Excuse me. Traumatic brain injury, often talked about as the signature wound of the current conflict. Why? Because of IEDs, improvised explosive devices. If you were in Iraq or Afghanistan during the last 10 years and you went anywhere, ever, whether you were transporting arms, whether you were part of a combat mission, or you were just moving food from one base to another base, you were subjected to the threat of being blown up. And that experience whether it actually happens or not is terrifying. When it does happen, what we often talk about are the consequences are often traumatic brain injury in some form, which includes any period of loss of consciousness, any loss of memory, any alteration of mental state, the time of the incidents. Essentially what we're talking about is a jarring of the brain, a concussion of some sort, very much like what you might be hearing about in terms of National Football League. They're struggling with this issue. The difficulty of traumatic brain injury is that many people who have it don't know they have it. So you could have the experience, I talked to a veteran recently who was in numerous explosions, was blown backwards, was blown off his vehicle, lost his helmet because of the force of the blow, explosion, but wasn't physically injured. Got up, dusted himself off, put his helmet back on, took about 12 Advil, and went on with his day. And so the difficulty of traumatic brain injury is that you have all of these symptoms, but you have no idea why, because physically you look the same, and no one else thinks there's anything wrong with you. You've never asked for care, and yet when you come back to school, and this is often where it really shows itself and manifests itself, you cannot concentrate. You went to the VA, they said you don't have PTSD, although those two overlap. So why aren't you able to concentrate? Why is your impulse control poor? Why do you feel like not yourself? And it's often difficult to get to that because you don't realize that something actually did happen to you. And it takes a lot of history taking to get to that sometimes. TB, traumatic brain injury diagnoses, also clearly very consistent. As deployments go up, so do traumatic brain injury diagnoses. Between 2000 and 2010, we're talking about nearly 200,000 veterans. It's a lot. I'm not going to show this, but what I am going to do is model how you deal with a traumatic clip. And actually, one of the reasons that I'm not going to show it is that typically what I would like to do, and it just didn't work out with the timing today, is typically I would take a break before showing this. And if we were doing a talk or if we were doing a lecture, and I would say, hey, we're going to take a 5 or 10 minute break, then I'm going to show you a clip that some of you may not want to see because you may not sleep well tonight or you just don't feel like seeing something go boom. If you're someone that doesn't want to see something go boom, why don't you come back in about 15 minutes? That allows someone not to stand up in the middle of a talk and walk out, right? So if I say now, if anyone doesn't want to see it, just go ahead and walk out and come back in 10 minutes. Then in order to do that, you have to put yourself on the spot. I find that that's not very helpful. So something to be aware of, at the very least, offer a warning, what we call trigger warnings. And when you can, allow for people to not see traumatic images without having to put themselves on the spot and have everyone look at them. So I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to do is I'm going to show you this chart of all of the common symptoms of traumatic brain injury and PTSD. Memory, concentration, learning, following complicated directions, language problems, impulse problems, slow or cloudy thinking, depression, anxiety, stress tolerance, sleep problems, inflexibility, feeling guilty, denial, social inappropriateness, headache, fatigue, poor balance, dizziness, changes in vision, hearing, or touch, sexual problems. Sounds like fun, doesn't it? How many of these on this list do you think would impact a student's ability to be successful in your class or on your campus? All of them, right? And for many of our veterans, this is what they are contending with. If they sometimes just getting to your class or getting to your class and sitting through it, or just going to all of your classes, regardless of the grade that they get, is a tremendous accomplishment in and of itself because of all of this that's happening. So here are the common symptoms. This also makes TBI and PTSD difficult to diagnose because they have so many symptoms in common. Those are the symptoms that really overlap between them. And here are the few that don't. So the ones in pink or red are really symptoms that we associate more primarily with traumatic brain injury. So again, if you hear a student talking about this, if you notice this in some way, a good opportunity to have a discussion with them. Does this gentleman look like he has a traumatic brain injury? When you see him, do you think to yourself, oh, that's a guy that's been blown up? No. You don't, right? There's nothing in any way that you can see that would indicate that this person has a traumatic brain injury, and yet his actual story is a story of tremendous dysfunction. He has severe headaches daily, tremendous difficulty concentrating, tremendous difficulty memory, has a lot of trouble getting out of the house, but you won't see that in your class or on your school. What you'll see is a decent-looking guy with his baseball hat on. So it's hard to notice. Sometimes you'll see some changes in facial features, but oftentimes you won't. A day in the life of a student veteran with PTSD or traumatic brain injury. This is kind of a composite of something that could happen, but it's not an unusual one. I would say it's a fairly common one. Due to poor sleep and hypervigilance, meaning I thought I heard a noise, so I went and I sat by the window and I waited for 2 hours until I figured out what the noise was, and I couldn't really figure out what the noise was, so I had some intrusive thoughts and memories because I was all jacked up wondering what was outside, and that was so unpleasant that I really couldn't sleep, so I took some medication, either prescribed or not prescribed, and that would help me sleep, but by that point it was 3 in the morning, so I overslept. So by the time the medication kicked in, I was actually late. Because I overslept, I was stuck in rush hour traffic, which is not what I normally do. I usually like to get to school an hour early so that I can get my parking spot and get my spot in class and get organized, but today I'm late. As a result, I have to run to class, which exacerbates the knee, ankle, back, shoulder injury that I have. My regular seat, which I always sit in and makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, is not available because I'm late. I feel totally out of control because the routine that I've created to help me feel in control has been flipped upside down today. And now, and only now, I remember that there is a test with open book, but in my rush to get to class and to find my seat and to feel comfortable and to get settled, I left my backpack with the book in the car. Anxiety, shame, frustration, anger, and the test has not started yet. And it's only 9 a.m. If this sounds like I'm piling it all on, I'm not. Okay? If this sounds like I've taken all the bad things that can happen and put them into one morning, I haven't. This kind of scenario is not uncommon for a lot of veterans, oftentimes, some version of this. You can understand how just getting to school and sitting in your classroom and taking a test is an accomplishment for some folks. Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
How do they deal with it, or how do we deal with it?
How do we deal with it?
We deal with it by being supportive, by trying to be supportive, by offering guidance when we can, by offering understanding when we can, by letting veterans know that we're available to be supportive. We don't have to intrusively ask them what's going on. We don't have to actually know. But what we do is we let them know that we are willing to do a little bit extra for them. Yesterday when I talked, I suggested that that doesn't mean allowing veterans to break the rules. But it means maybe an extra 5 minutes of your time if you have a suspicion that this is what's happening. Okay. The following video, this is really why we needed the sound, was made by an OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom veteran. The dialogue contains some naughty words. I feel comfortable that some of you have heard these words before. If you haven't and you don't like hearing naughty words, feel free to excuse yourself. This is not a traumatic video, but I do want to tell you that it's in there. If you are offended by it, please blame Betsy Sheldon, who's sitting in the back, because I initially thought that we shouldn't include it, and Betsy said, no, people love swearing, so we put it in. Here we go. Okay. This video clip is, I think, representative of, and it's a couple of years old, of how a lot of student veterans feel on campus. Okay? It's obviously one person's opinion, but I think it captures something really well. Here we go.
So you are a Iraq War veteran?
Yes, I am.
I support the troops, but I am against the war.
I understand how you feel. I do not like the wars, plural either.
But the Iraq War is over.
The Iraq War is not over. There are still 50,000 U.S. service members still in Iraq, and many have been killed since the so-called combat forces have left.
But I saw on the news that the Iraq War is over.
You are mistaken. Even if the United States and other coalition forces leave completely, there will still be violence. Anyway, how do you support the troops?
I have a yellow ribbon on the back of my car.
Putting a bumper sticker on your car does not mean you support the troops.
And I like the United States Marine Corps on my Facebook page.
That is completely irrelevant. How much do you actually know about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan?
I know a lot. I am a political science major, and I studied abroad in Italy for a semester. I know a lot about the world.
Can you tell me the difference between a Sunni and Shiite Muslim?
I do not know what that is.
Can you tell me what ethnic group in Afghanistan the Taliban are a part of?
The terrorist group.
Can you tell me what an IED is?
My friend Jennifer went to the Jersey Shore last summer, and she had to take antibiotics for a wicked bad IED.
That is completely foul. I think you may be confusing an IED with something else.
Is that a new iPhone app?
No.
Oh wait. I think I saw that on Cake Boss last week. Is it a type of dessert?
No. It is not.
Can I get it on Netflix?
I hope so. Do you know what an RPG is?
Yes. They are for nerds who can't get any pussy. I am against the war, but support troops.
Again. You have clearly demonstrated that you don't actually know why war is a bad thing. You are just going along with what everybody else says without giving it much thought. You might not actually support the troops, but say so, because it is the politically correct thing to say today.
But I am a political science major, and I have studied abroad.
You are wasting your parents' money by pursuing a nearly worthless degree, and by visiting a first world Western European country, so you can drink underage and visit museums that you're not even interested in anyway.
But I have learned about the world, and I'm against the war, but support the troops.
How have you supported the troops?
I pay taxes.
Your tax dollars are not going towards funding these wars. The defense budget is propped up with foreign debt. Essentially, the People's Republic of China is financing the war on terror at an exorbitant interest rate. You and I are going to be paying for these wars long after the people who started them are dead.
OMG, that is like totally not cool. My dad is a lawyer. I'm going to text him to tell him that this is wrong, and that he must do something about it.
Did you vote in the last election?
Yes. I voted for President Obama.
November 2, 2010 was the last election, which was a midterm election. The presidential election was in 2008. You did not vote in the last election.
I am a political science major, and I have studied abroad.
Have you written to your congressman or woman or senator about the issues that bother you?
I did not know you could do that.
Have you donated any money to any veterans organizations?
No, I am way uber busy.
Would you ever consider joining the military?
No. The military is for poor and uneducated people.
You are wrong. 97% of the armed forces have high school diplomas. Also, young people from the middle and upper middle classes are overrepresented in recruitment demographics, and nearly 75% of Americans are unfit for military service due to a variety of reasons, and not all make it through recruit training. It is actually harder to join the military than it is to get into college.
I do not believe you. I go to college because I am smart. I am a political science major and have studied abroad.
Besides me, have you actually talked to any Iraq and Afghanistan veterans?
No. I saw on the news that you all have PTSD and are crazy.
You can't be this fucking stupid.
OMG, I have to go. My BFF Madison is texting me. We are going out clubbing tonight. TTYL.
All right. So I think it captures something. It captures something. We'll hear. I know there are some vets here that are going to be on the panel later. Definitely like to hear from them if they think it accurately captures some experience that they've had. But I think it really does. I think it captures the sense that a lot of veterans have of really, really being quite different and having different experiences and thoughts about the world than their peers. And this one does a good job of showing that. So, if you want to know what's it like, this is, I think, for a lot of folks, at least partly what it can be like, and part of the stress involved in that. Some typical other challenges on campus, in addition to student political science majors. When veterans first come to campus, oftentimes they are on a mission. They want to accomplish too much too quickly. They're maybe a little bit older. They've had past accomplishments. They're starting from the bottom again at school. There's a known path, a career path. I'm going back to school because I want X, Y, and Z. And sometimes they start too fast. 18 credits. They're used to working really hard. I'm going to take 18 credits. That's a lot, right? 18 credits, 20 credits for a first semester. And they'll start with all of the hardest prerequisites that they need. I'm just going to knock that out. I'm going to knock that right out, and then I'll move on to some of those electives, right? And so sometimes it's helpful to know that and to really throw in some guidance about how college education is a kind of long-term marathon kind of a thing, particularly when, for many veterans, their first semester is largely about readjusting and just feeling balanced, even their first year. And so I typically, when I'm asked, really discourage the taking of 18 units and really talk about, just get used to being on campus, get used to being around other people, get used to being with professors and doing assignments. And the best way to do that is to take easier classes that you're good at. Start with that. Veterans feel very offended sometimes when not trusted. And that includes things like, I forgot my homework, can I bring it in tomorrow? And the instructor says, no, I have to see it if I let you do that, right? Or, some version of, I need you to trust that I actually am telling you the truth. And then having the instructor treat them, in their opinion, like a small child. And, the veteran will say, a year ago, I was in charge of a $100 million jet functioning correctly. The government trusted me with that. Can you not trust me with going to my car and getting this assignment, for example? So when you are used to being trusted with lives and equipment and responsibility, to come home and have that taken away is very difficult. I used to joke that, you can have a pilot in the military who still is not allowed to rent a car. Okay? Boredom is this all there is? That can be tough. Managing financial aid, post 9/11 GI benefits, college loans, all of that. Again, it's not that you need to know the answer to all this. The thing that I want you to get out of this is that if a veteran is struggling with it or can't figure it out, the thing not to do is to just point them in the direction of an office. Typically, these are very difficult bureaucratic systems to navigate. I frankly don't understand all of it. When I think I do, someone asks a question that then blows my mind and I don't understand, and I deal with this stuff a lot. So it's hard to navigate these different systems, and where you can offer very clear guidance, or actually, if you have the form, sometimes it's as simple as you don't have to understand it, but if you could say to a veteran, look, if you have the forms with you, why don't you bring them out? We'll sit and go over them together. Sometimes it's just really overwhelming with so many different things you have to attend to actually read the form and have somebody read it with you and say, look, it says here this and this and this. Can you provide that? Let's fill this in right now together. We'll knock it out together. And the veteran feels like, okay, cool. All right, I can do that. So sometimes just taking that extra 5 minutes to look over the form with them is enough to get them from point A to point B. Okay? Waiting in line. Very, very frustrating for everyone. Anyone here have lines on their campus? So most of us are not in the position of being able to do anything about the lines. What I might do, however, talking to a veteran, is if I knew that there was a line at the bookstore, for example, I would suggest that they go at a particular time. They would say, well, I'm going to go to the bookstore now, and I might say, actually, the bookstore is going to have a really long line now. Are you sure you want to do that? No, I don't want to do that. When does it open? It opens at this time. I would go at that time. Okay? So just helping them structure their day in a way to minimize some of these triggers is a good thing when you can. Insensitive bureaucracy, this kind of thing out to lunch drives everyone crazy. It can particularly drive veterans crazy because they're used to people being where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there, and then knowing the information that they need to know. And so sometimes going to a place and saying, I need this to happen. And the person says, well, I don't know how to do that. And then you say, well, who does know how to do that? I don't know. That's a new experience sometimes for veterans and is really infuriating. And typically in the military, it doesn't work that way. You know where to go, and where you go, someone will know the answer. That they'll frustrate you, but at least you'll be in the right place. And here, navigating all these different systems is difficult. So again, when you can stay an extra few minutes to really kind of do that extra little bit, or if you are someone who knows, let's say you're sending somebody over to financial aid, you're an instructor. What I would recommend doing with a veteran, and again, this doesn't hurt to do this with any student, is pick up the phone right then and there, call financial aid, say, I'm sitting here with a veteran. Who should he speak to? Who should she speak? Oh, it's to Sam. Sam, are you going to be there for 10 minutes? Excellent. Don't move. I'm sending this veteran over there right now. And that can be the difference between a veteran completing their financial aid forms and a veteran not completing their financial aid forms just because it's too frustrating for them to navigate that. Just that phone call can make a big difference. Protests and signs can be very stressful for veterans in certain situations. Again, it's a First Amendment right. I'm not suggesting that we do anything about it except to be aware that it can be really difficult. Be sensitive to it. Disrespect to instructors. You may hear this on the panel later. Most veterans feel very strongly about acting respectfully towards instructors, even instructors they don't like, and are very offended by and have a very difficult time when other students are texting and arguing and talking on their cell phone and generally distracting. And if you are an instructor where that's happening, you may find that a veteran will actually stand up and correct that action. If I was in this situation, I would be embarrassed that a veteran had to do that for me, and I would take that as a sign that I need to tighten it up. But in any case, be aware that particularly for veterans, that kind of sort of loose classroom management can be very, very stressful and actually really can impede learning. So just keep it in mind. Lack of cultural competency, just like it would be true in any cultural group. So I have drill this weekend. What can I do? If I fail my classes, it'll kill my GPA and my GI Bill. I don't know. That kind of approach is very difficult, right? So just having that, I don't know, but let me try to find out for you, again, can make a big difference to academic success for veterans. Be careful what you say. This is a quote. I am sure that the instructor who said this, you would have to be a complete idiot to join the Army these days, did not realize that he was being offensive. I'm sure that it was not deliberate. But I'm also sure that the 3 veterans in the class who heard that did not go back to the class, even though it was the middle of the semester. And so I would suggest everyone is entitled to your opinions. I have my opinions about the war, of course, but be really thoughtful about when you're talking about the military, when you're talking about the war. If you're going to express an opinion, even I bet that this was just an offhand comment that this instructor made and didn't realize how it would be received. So just be really mindful of the comments that you are making and the comments that other students are making about the conflict overseas, and realize that to those of us who didn't serve, those are often theoretical conversations. It's a political conversation. And for those of us who did serve, it's a very personal conversation that has very personal significance. So again, not to suggest not talking about it, but to really be thoughtful when you hear another student bringing up the war, to jump in and protect if you can, and to be mindful of the way that you talk about these things. Because it really, I mean, this is the kind of comment that a student will keep in their mind for years. Yeah, please.
This is one thing that is really a little baffling to me, because that same person would probably never in a million years say, gosh, it's really stupid to be black today, or it's really stupid
Right.
to be Jewish today, or whatever. They would never do something like that, and yet they feel perfectly comfortable with saying something like this, and without any recognition about how they're depersonalizing a whole class of people. And I don't.
And their experience, yes. I think the disconnect largely comes from not having a lot of contact with veterans. I mean, I did this training actually not far from here once for a group of clinicians, just clinicians. And I'll tell you that there were 20 clinicians in the room. None of them had served. None of them had family members who had served. And none of them knew anyone who had served or had family members who had served. And so this conversation about military experiences and readjustment stress and all that was literally like a sort of sociology class to them. I mean, really, if you aren't around it and you're particularly not interested in it and you're against the war maybe, these are topics that you literally may know absolutely nothing about. And I think that's where some of these comments come from. They just don't know and have had no exposure. That's why hopefully sometimes these trainings are helpful. Yeah, please.
Well, I just have more of a suggestion than a comment. I would actually say that these types of comments are much more common
Yeah.
on college campuses.
I would agree.
That faculty feel that they have often a free platform to say these types of comments, whether it's a comment joining the Army, whether it's a comment on their opinion of the Middle East conflict, no matter what it is. But I think it's important for students to then talk with the veterans group or somebody so that those faculty can be educated that it's not an appropriate place to be saying these things in the classroom, especially if you're in an accounting class or a physics class, or
right.
It's almost acceptable if you're in the social sciences.
Right, and even then, there's a way to talk about it where you can even express an opinion. I think it's legitimate even in some cases for an instructor to say, look, here's my thoughts about the war, because maybe you're talking about that, but there's a way to say it that honors and recognizes other people's experiences.
Students need to then go and say, because I have students complain about different situations to me where you need to educate faculty that this is not the place where you could be offending, or even if you're not offending, you're in a sense brainwashing other students in the class as to this real true opinion. And we need to we need to work with those faculty, and which are probably not the ones who are here coming to these types of trainings, to say this is.
So it's not you, is what we're saying. It's definitely not you.
I make my own mess of mistakes, but for what is appropriate behavior, even when you're working with students about these types of.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with that. Was there one more comment? Yeah.
Yes, I want to share with the group that veterans who have sustained a traumatic brain injury or concussion are risk of developing post-traumatic epilepsy. I want to invite you to all go to the online or go to Google Epilepsy Foundation, and there's a small 15-minute online course on seizure recognition. So in the event when you're veterans,
thank you for mentioning that. Yes, that veterans with traumatic brain injury are at risk for post-injury epilepsy, post-traumatic epilepsy. They're also at risk of looking like they are drunk, when in fact they are not drunk and have not had anything to drink. So sometimes what happens is someone with a thank you for bringing that up, because it reminds me to also say sometimes students with traumatic brain injuries can sound like they are on something. They're slurring their words, or they're not concentrating, they're looking around, especially if they're stressed. And I've had instances where they've been accused. I had somebody pulled off an airplane once where people are accused of being inebriated who are actually veterans with disabilities. Yeah, last comment, and then I need to finish up. Yeah.
I wonder if in the last few minutes you're going to talk all about.
Can you just talk louder?
Yeah, I wonder if you're going to mention or talk about the LGBT issues and the Don't Ask, Don't Tell and how, people's going to see how it's affecting them.
I wasn't going to. I have talked about that in the past. I will say it's a really relevant topic. That there are lots of ways within the military. I talked about some of them, including military sexual trauma, but there are lots of ways that you can have very traumatic experiences in the military, very traumatic identity difficulties within the military because of the homogeneity of military culture. And so, yeah, I apologize for not mentioning that. There was a time that it was in the talk, and then somehow it isn't today. But yes, that is also a very relevant topic. And for our veterans who were in the military at a time of don't ask, don't tell, and then maybe came out of the military and came out during that time, and then were wrestling with their identity as being out. Now the folks that they served with, if they're all on Facebook, see a completely different version of them because they've come out, and that causes a lot of stress. There's a lot of sometimes frustration. We didn't know you. Why did you keep this from us? And so on and so forth. And so the process of coming out both in the military and after the military can be, as it is no matter where you do it, can be complicated, but particularly complicated for LGBT veterans. So I'll address it briefly by saying that, yes, it's definitely something to be talked about. I think having a military experience in addition to that adds a whole other layer of complication and sometimes trauma, depending on what your experience was. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I want to get through just a couple more slides because we're really at time. Good ways to start a conversation with veterans include, what did you do in the military? Where did you go? How are you and your family doing? You will not go wrong with those questions. These questions are better to ask than just saying, oh, you served in Iraq? Thank you for your service. Now I will scurry away because I am uncomfortable and don't know what to say. Okay, it's better to actually ask these questions than just throw out a thank you for your service and get away. Show some interest if you can. Couple more recommendations. Mental and physical health issues, as we know, okay, make referrals. Encourage involvement. If you know a veteran, they may be having, if there isn't a VRC, obviously, if there is one, encourage involvement in the VRC. If there isn't, and you know a veteran likes books, encourage a reading group. If you know a veteran likes plays, send them to the draw. Help them integrate into the community of your college. It will often be difficult for them to do that on their own or know how to. They might be intimidated. If you see things or know things that are going to be a good fit for veterans, what you're doing is helping them reintegrate and build social support. So when you can, offer that up, offer some encouragement, give a little nudge, and you will sometimes see great benefit from that. Including welcoming text is helpful oftentimes. Be flexible when you can be flexible. Have a contact person we talked about, someone on your campus who you know works with veterans and understands veterans' issues. And if you know someone at a local VA or vet center, also extremely useful. I know vet centers love to go out of the office and come and talk to you. So even if it's just during lunch hour, get someone from the vet center or VA to come and talk to you, get to know their name, get their business card, and so on. Those kind of relationships go a long way in helping our veterans. Finally, do not please underestimate, and hopefully after today's talk, you will not underestimate some of the challenges that some veterans face. And yet at the same time, don't overestimate what veterans have accomplished. Should that say underestimate? I keep going back and forth. Appreciate what veterans have accomplished already and what they can and will accomplish regardless of the challenges that they have, regardless of the mental health and physical health challenges that they have. I talked to a veteran recently, 100% disabled for PTSD and traumatic brain injury. He is on his 3rd master's degree. He's going to make a lot more money than I do. He's doing exceptionally well anyway, and in particular for what he is struggling with. So as much as we're talking about challenges, don't come away from this talk, please, with the idea that veterans can't do. Veterans can do. They're going to accomplish a lot. They bring tremendous strength and talent to your campus, and it's important to come away from that. These are some of the things, the ways that veterans enhance your campus. Finally, if you don't know what to say to a veteran, you can always say, welcome home. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.